going on, everybody? Mr. Stevens. Welcome to Math with Mr. Stevens. Good to see you. We are on page 160 today in Module 4. We are still in Lesson 15. There's a ton of examples here in Lesson 15, but we are now moving into some of the exercises. And these exercises are asking specifically for something that we've been doing with these pairs that we've been looking at, and that is looking for the slope of the non-vertical line. This one asks specifically for the slope, and so we're going to do essentially the same things we've been doing. We're going to look at question number 2. In particular, we're not going to worry about question number 1. We can find the slope of that one. It's really easy, and so we're essentially just going to use the exact same methods that we've been using. In this particular equation, they give you a Q, and they really want you to think about the distance between P and R in relation to Q. So when you go from P to Q, you go 1 to the right, and then from Q to R, you go up 3. Those are all things that we've already done before. So what I want us to do, because it's going to be more useful for us when it comes time to create the ratio that becomes our slope, is continue to go up and down first, because that's always going to be your numerator in your fraction. So when you create your slope, that's your numerator, is you're going up and down. And then your left and right, that is going to be your denominator. That is your horizontal. That is your x. So here they want you to go from P to Q and then Q to R, which would be moving horizontally first and then vertically second. I want us to go the other way simply because it's easier for us to create our fraction and create our ratio after that. So as we go from P to R, we go up 3. We go from 1 to 4, which is an increase of 3, and then we go 1 to the right, which is an increase of 1. And so when we go to put this together as to answer what our slope is, again, looking specifically for slope, they're not asking for steepness anymore. They're now being explicitly asking for the slope of this particular line. Again, the way we create the slope of that particular line is looking at the change in y divided by the change in x. Our change in y is a plus 3. Our change in x is a plus 1. So that gives us 3. 3 over 1 is 3. And so the line, or the slope rather, for this line is going to be a slope of 3. And so we're going to start calling that our m. The reason for that is when it comes time to put this into an actual equation, our slope is going to be represented by the letter m. No longer is slope or a constant of proportionality or our unit rate, no longer are we using the letter k. We are now going to be using the letter m. It means the same thing. It means the exact same thing. There's no difference in the way we calculate it and the way we use it. The only difference is now we have a different letter. Unfortunately, in 7th grade, they make us use K when we could just be using M. So that way it would make sense for 8th grade. But here we are, we're changing the letter. But we're not changing the meaning, we're not changing the way it's found, we're not changing the way it's put together. Okay? So we're not doing 1, we're going to skip 3. We're going to jump over to question number 4 here. Okay? In question number 4, this line is a little bit different than the ones that we've looked at before. And we're going to see why here in a second. Again, they ask us for what is the slope of this line. And so what we need to do now is we are now moving from point P, which is at the origin, to point R, which is at 1, -1. We are now moving in a different direction in terms of slope. So if you take a look at and you think about all of the slopes we've done so far, all of them have been going up from left to right. Okay, so we think of them as going like up a hill. They've all been increasing. All of our values have been a positive. We move up into the right to go from one point to the next point. This particular example is a little bit different. To get from P to R, we are not going up. We have to go down. So we're going down 1. So we're going to write that as a -1, a -1. And then we move to the right. Okay, which is a +1. So we have a -1 and a +1 in terms of our directions to get from point P to point R. And so when we go to create our slope, we look at, and the reason I put a +1 and a +3 over here is just as a reminder that it's positive. In this particular case, though, we have a negative. So we have a -1 divided by a +1. we need to remember our multiplication rules. A negative divided by a positive is going to give us a negative. So our slope for this particular line is a -1. Our m is equal to -1 for this line. Okay? So as we go down, going from left to right, and we look at all these going from left to right simply because that's the way we do math, that's the way we read. Going down from left to right is going to result in a negative slope, as we have here, whereas all of our other ones have been going up from left to right. When we go up from left to right, that gives us a positive value for our slope. So negative value goes down from left to right, positive value goes up from left to right. That should all make sense. Let's take a look at some more examples on the next page, page 162. So before we even get to the slope of this line, we should be able to figure out that whether our slope is going to be negative or positive, just by looking at it. So when we're going from point P to point R, is that going to be negative or positive? Hopefully you've come up with the answer to be negative. We are going down, okay? This is a very, very steep line that is going in a downward trajectory. So think of it like you are going downhill. You're going to be going pretty fast, okay? So when we go from P to R, we're going to go down several spaces, and that is 1, 2, 3, 4. So we're going to go down 4. That's a -4. And then we're going to go 1 to the right. That's still a +1. So when we go to create our slope, our change in our vertical and change in our elevation is a -4 divided by a +1. That gives us a slope of -4. Okay, so the slope of this line is a -4. Fantastic. And then finally part 6, or question number 6. Question number 6 is a little bit tricky. They try to confuse you here. We have seen one that looks like this before. We haven't looked at it in terms of its slope, but we have seen these types of lines, we have seen these types of equations before, and back in lesson 14. So again, we're looking at how do we get from point P to point R. It's the same deal, but we are increasing zero change vertically, and then there's obviously a change horizontally, so 1, 2, 3, a +3 in terms of its horizontal. So when we go to create our slope, we have a 0 over 3, 0 over a +3, which of course just gives us 0. So that means our m is equal to 0. A horizontal line has no slope, has literally a 0 value for its slope. All right. So when we see these horizontal lines, we talked about before what they are going to look like in terms of their equation. This is what it looks like in terms of its graph. And now in relation to that, its slope. It has a slope of 0. It does not have a slope of what's called undefined. That's another type of vertical line, or that's a vertical line that we are going to see a little bit later. So when we just have a straight line, whether it is a horizontal line or a vertical line, finding the slopes can be a little bit difficult. This one, though, it should not be. Horizontal lines always have a slope of 0. Fantastic. If you take a look at page 163, and we'll wrap this up really quickly. Here's a lesson summary. Lots of notes. Let's look at some things. Slope. Okay? Your slope is a number that's representing the steepness of a line on a coordinate plane. Okay? So the slope represents the steepness. And there's a specific number that is going from that. Okay? From left to right, have a positive slope that go up from left to right. That's inclining. Okay? Ones that are declining, going down from left to right, have a negative slope. Okay? Pretty straightforward. And so here, they talk about how to find the slope. In this particular case, the slope is 2, because you go up 2, and you go to the right 1, and then 2 over 1 is, of course, going to be equal to 2. Okay? So that's how you take a look at the lesson summary. Hopefully that's kind of clears things up and makes it all really straightforward for you. And then as you get into the exit ticket, that's one of your assignments. Hopefully this makes a little bit more sense. And beyond the exit ticket, there's of course the homework helpers that you should dig into, and then the problem set. The problem set goes on for page after page after page. We're going to go through some of them. You're going to have some of them assigned to you. Hopefully this makes sense. Understanding slope is going to be a big key in what we do moving forward, whether in creating equations as well as graphing equations, and then looking forward to functions. So it's going to be helpful, it's going to be useful. We need to know how to find the slope of a line. Hopefully, if you have any questions, just send me an email or ask me during your meet. Otherwise, adios. See you later.